All right, good evening. We're getting a couple other council members logged in, but we will go ahead and start our regular meeting, Tuesday, July 19th, 2022, and I will have our city clerk do our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart. Councilmember Ratuja Indapure.
Present.
Councilmember Roisin O'Farrell.
Present.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And I did want to mention that Councilmember Stewart is traveling, so she does have an excused absence. So thank you all for being here. For Pledge Allegiance, Councilmember Howe, if you will go ahead. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Howe. Land acknowledgement statement. Do I have any volunteers to read that? If anyone has it pulled up.
I'll read it.
Okay. Oh yeah, Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Our land acknowledgement is a statement we read to recognize Indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of the lands on which we now live, work, and recreate. The city is a proud partner of the Snoqualmie tribe, and we feel it is important to recognize the history and connection tribes have always had to these lands. Therefore, we will now read our statement. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continued to live here since time immemorial.
All right, thank you so much. Next, I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
I motion to approve the agenda.
Seconded.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, by a vote of 6-0, we are approved. Next, we have public comment. We do have a few people in person, so when I call your name, I believe, Larry, you are first. If you go up, there should be a microphone, and it should show a countdown if we are ready to go. And you will have 3 minutes, and I believe there's a little clock that will show you the countdown on there as well.
I would. Good evening. Larry Crandall, I am, Sammamish. Welcome will be brief and only a little bit about Larry. So keep going forward as the world keeps turning. There are atlases, there are maps, but do trust your inner compass, please. As for seniors, which will be on the agenda later, remember, educating about aging is important. There are many myths about aging that need to be quelled. About me, I am available to give you directions. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Next, we have Margaret.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Rosenau. My address is 21801 Northeast 4th Street. And I'm representing the Sammamish Senior Group. I moved to Sammamish in 1980 because I wanted to live in the country. There were no grocery stores or gas stations nearby. I loved it. Then they started to build a city around me of over 65,000 people. But I still love Sammamish. We live in one of the best small cities in America, as we all know. I appreciated the stages in my life in Sammamish with all the programs in Sammamish for kids, schools, sports, parks, music, plays, arts. I was one of the art commissioners for about 8 years, and more. Now I am an older adult and plan to keep enjoying Sammamish, but there is no program for my stage in my life at this moment in the city. A few of us started to work on our own. I'm part of the volunteer group called Sammamish Seniors and have been creating and offering programs since before the pandemic. You probably, excuse me, you probably know the statistics of our cities from 2019, the US Census. City population, 64,675. Ages 60 plus, 8,615, 13.3%. Ages 50 to 59, 9,368, 14.5%. Total 50 plus, 17,983, 27%, more than 27%, 27.8%. Sammamish Seniors is an all-volunteer grassroots community organization started in 2019 to provide opportunities for local adults aged 50 plus to connect, learn, grow, and most important, ward off the social isolation that can unfold over time. You will hear from some of my other Sammamish senior colleagues about what we have accomplished so far, what we are planning to do and why, our need for space to meet, funding and more, and why, and how you can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joyce.
I'm Joyce Bottenberg. I've lived in Sammamish since 1986. Currently live at 21905 Southeast 20th Street in Sammamish. I speak about the experience of our Sammamish senior group and the accomplishments. As background, we connected with all the senior centers around us, virtually and in person, to understand how they approach their approach to seniors, the older adults, and senior center activities. We then asked ourselves, what do seniors in the Sammamish community need and want? We conducted several surveys within Sammamish to find that out. In the summer 2019, through the Chamber of Commerce and the Eastside Friends of Seniors, we learned a lot. The open house, February 20th, 2020, and weekly sessions after that, we learned much more. In emails to and from many, many seniors in this community, we learned even more, and a survey that we held in spring 2022. Our 2021 accomplishments include meeting regularly with our volunteer group of about 15 to 20 to develop and execute programs that are accessible for adults ages 50 plus. We offer programs weekly to the community, including the community conversations that several of you have been participating in. We created a presence through social media outreach, the new website this spring. We launched a book club with 6 books read in 2021 and discussed, and they're across a broad range of topics. We established a case statement of need that classifies the whys, whats, and whos behind need for a senior center. We established partnerships to share programs and content with numerous community groups, including Eastside Friends of Seniors, Indian American Community Services, King County Library Services, Sammamish Friends, Sound Generations, and the nearby senior centers, especially Redmond, Bellevue, Issaquah, Mount Si, and Snow Valley. We created a newly designed monthly newsletter, and we continued the weekly updates to over 300 Sammamish residents, containing a broad range of topics. Most of you are on our mailing list because you asked to be. We launched a vibrant and inviting website to promote news and opportunities in weekly webinars and all. We created that survey in spring, which had a response rate of almost 23% from our database. Social isolation was the #1 concern. The bottom line, the proof of concept of senior need in our community has been clearly established. Our initial in-person in February 2020 had over 300 participants, and we averaged over 70 the next 3 sessions before COVID hit. Since then, we've held over 90 weekly community conversations, interviews with community leaders and other influencers. We assisted numerous seniors in need during the pandemic and last year's heat wave. Now we are working to establish in-person meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally.
Good evening. It's great to be here with you. I want to talk just a little bit about why does Sammamish need a senior center or a senior-oriented program? Just a little bit about my background. I've been in project development and national training for the National Council on Aging. I've been with the AARP Foundation in Washington, D.C., and with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in Princeton, New Jersey. So I have a broad view of what I'd like to see in Sammamish in senior centers, and I've worked with many, many of them across the nation. So why do we need senior-focused activities here? You know, when we age, we want to participate in non-workplace activities. And as we retire or move into our empty nest phase, our interests change. So as Joyce mentioned, the last Human Services Commission highlighted seniors as one of the great needs in our community because meaningful connections disappear when we move from the workplace into our homes pretty permanently, and especially during the pandemic. So we know that social isolation over time does impact our health. It impacts our longevity and our quality of life. And so you're probably all aware of Alzheimer's research, but there was just something published this April that talked about, it was in the Seattle Times, that increasingly validates the importance of social connections. So we know that, and all of the surrounding communities around us all have senior programs. So what do we expect to see the benefits in this community when we have these activities available? We're going to create a more dynamic community. We're going to build stronger cultural connections in those stronger community connections. The other thing is, I don't know if you guys have a lot of friends who are seniors, but I have many who have moved out of this community because there's not much to do here. So we want to keep seniors in the community, and we want this to be a more vibrant and engaged community. We want to foster intergenerational connections. That's super important because if we do that, that's the sign of a really healthy community. So now, I want to say a quick word, 19 seconds, a quick word about the word seniors, because Amy addressed that, I think she talked about that. It was a handy descriptor when we started, but COVID changed our lives. And we now hear daily about empty nesters who are working from home and they're isolated. So we serve 60+. So we, as an active and older adults, are making an encore into a new phase of life. We're turning over a new leaf. We want to connect with our peers. We want to engage in activities and thrive as members of this community. So stay tuned. We've already had a focus group about a month ago on this. So here's Tom.
Thank you so much. Yes, Tom, you are next.
Okay. Hello, hello. Good evening. I'm Tom Ehlers of 25819 Northeast First Place in Sammamish, and I'll be the fifth of six commentators tonight on this, what's become this informal senior night with the City Council here. So we want to first and foremost emphasize that we really are very thankful for the engagement and work that's already been done by the city to help identifying potential meeting spaces. You'll hear more about that tonight, and that was in your packet. We thought you'd appreciate a bit more background on our organization, Sammamish Seniors. We've got a dedicated and experienced group in place. We've led and even actually started up our own nonprofits, provided board leadership. We have deep volunteer expertise, both in Sammamish and beyond. We're dedicated to using our experience and skills to help create a substantial and sustainable senior-oriented program in Sammamish. We're currently in the process of aligning with another nonprofit to establish 501c3 certification and insurance coverage. Key is to know we have the skills on the team, but we can't do it all ourselves. We need your help, and we have two asks for you to consider. We have the skills, as I mentioned. Our group has essentially been, as you've heard, in startup mode for about 3 years. Hard to be a startup nonprofit, and we've been working hard diligently as volunteers. But the question becomes, what are the next steps? In addition to space needs, which will be discussed later in the meeting, tonight we're specifically asking for your help in the area of, number one, funding, help to establish dedicated capacity that will create and execute relevant programming, almost a type of public-private initiative or partnership. More to come on that from the final speaker we have here. And number two is to establish a seniors advisory team for the city of Sammamish, very similar to the Sammamish Youth Board, or even the task force that assessed human services in the city, and we ended up creating a Human Services Commission out of that. We fully know Sammamish is a contract-based model, and today we have a recommendation on how to accelerate efforts to support seniors in our city. Our suggested approach, you're going to hear from our final speaker, is to create a line item in the upcoming budget for seniors and then extend a call for senior programming out into the community. Don Jaron is going to be up here in just a second. He's going to talk in more detail about how this could be accomplished for the city of Sammamish in his public comment. We're asking you tonight to consider how you can help us help the seniors of Sammamish. Thank you very much for listening. And I didn't get beat that.
All right, thank you. James?
James Easton, Sammamish, Washington. Now it's summer, I feel a little looser coming to these meetings. I'm in a t-shirt and shorts, and I'm even wearing my hat, which my family's probably hearsay. I grew up with an older dad, which meant I grew up with an older grandfather who sailed in World War II, Vietnam, and the Korean War, and if I ever wore a hat in my house, he would let me have it. And if I came to the dinner table, even at 90, with a hat on, I basically had a death wish. So he's probably rolling over in his grave right now, but my son is, he likes to fly, and he's a teenager, and he's in the Young Air Force Cadet Program, the Civil Air Patrol, and it's interesting. I drop him off at his meetings, and every time they go in and out of the building, they take their hats off. So somehow his chivalry got passed down to my kid and skipped me, but my head doesn't look quite as good as Kent Treen's anymore because I haven't kept up on shaving so I'm wearing the hat. But I feel like we're kind of a new beginning after last week. We have 2 new council members. It seemed like there's a huge void. Kent, you are the only one left from last year, so congratulations. I also noticed we have a new attorney. I don't know, maybe you're visiting, but I think we've gone through one attorney every year, probably for the last 4 or 5 years. And we used to go in an executive session every week, and Mary Wichter, I don't know if she's on the line today, but she was really good when we went into the executive session. We're sitting here, she would always ask, hey, is there any action to be taken? The mayor would always have to come back and state yes, whether it was or not. But I feel like the last at least 5, 6, maybe ever since the YMCA went in, all the action the city's ever taken comes out of executive session or in a settlement agreement or in a legal directive. And, you know, here we are starting anew. And usually when we pack this place with people, it's to fight something, and it's great. The seniors are all here asking for a community center. So I hope we can figure out a way to make it happen. We can change our governance in such a way that we could meet and just let everyone come together in unity and figure things out. I'd love to be part of that process. I have some land in the city that could be of tremendous benefit. But I'm hopeful that we take our month break, we get to enjoy this wonderful, beautiful summer, and we come back, do this retreat, and then just get stuff done and make some progress as a city and build a senior center and just kind of, go back on all the other things we haven't been looking at the last, who knows how long, 10 years or so. So it's great to be here. It's great, this wonderful summer, and enjoy the next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Dina Ann?
Hello, Mayor Clark, Council, and city staff. I'd like to first say welcome to the new council members. Good luck to you, and I'm excited for you. I'm here today to speak to agenda item number 13, the DEIB program. This program is going to be a big lift, but it's great that the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging program has been a top priority for the council and the city since your February council retreat. However, this program title is a broad statement. How will you, the council, as a whole, individually define diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? It's my belief that the meaning of words is very important. For example, inclusion. How will you define inclusion? Specifically, will inclusion contain language to cover biodiversity? Will it define inclusion as being all living things, including the habitat in our wildlife corridors, from the earth, soil, and trees, the inhabitants you can't see to those we marvel at, like hummingbirds, deer, bear, and the salmon that swim in our lakes and spawn up our creeks? Will language be specifically inclusive of the current and future parks of Sammamish, open spaces, streams, lakes, and the entire ecosystem that lives within those areas? The program will have a significant impact on the city of Sammamish. With that focus, what timeline will you establish for the implementation of the program, and what is the communication to the community that explains your program's definitions? How will you be clear, concise, and execute the program in a transparent way internally within the city government and externally to the city of Sammamish residents as well as the region? In closing, what do those definitions mean, and how will you measure the success of those definitions? Thank you for the time to speak tonight. Oh, and by the way, when you read the land acknowledgement passage earlier, it got me thinking. Your definitions, again, will impact these tribal lands even more than its people. Please keep in mind how our tribal ancestors would define diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for. I think that's it for in here. We'll move to our Zoom attendees.
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. You see we have 3 callers currently. I will unmute callers. Now we have 4 in the order they have raised their hands. I will now promote the first commenter. Mr. Gerund. You're muted, Mr. Gerund.
Evening, City Council. Do you hear me okay? My name is Don Jarron, and I'm a resident of Sammamish. I would like to speak tonight regarding agenda item number 15, new business, discussion, senior center. Staff will be presenting great information regarding other senior centers around Central Puget Sound and operating models. As they point out, Sammamish is a contract-based model of operating. The city is responsible for providing the facility, and a partner organization would provide the service and programming. You heard in public comment that a group of volunteers have taken the challenge of addressing senior needs. The core group of seniors, plus an advisory group, organized impressive in-person gatherings of Sammamish seniors before the pandemic. This group has maintained the momentum during the pandemic, going online with weekly community conversations and supported programs such as the Senior Book Club. This group has had very productive meetings with Sammamish Park staff and are pleased with the interim facility options which staff will describe to you today. But beyond interim physical meeting places for renewing in-person meetings when COVID risks ameliorate, and creating an advisory group to help guide the city in facility planning, there is a need for ongoing programming of a myriad of activities to benefit the experienced adults in Sammamish, some 18,000 residents over 50. For this, be it pickleball or mahjong, the volunteer seniors need contracted program coordination. It is with that in mind, and because the 23-24 budget is in the process of being fleshed out, that we are recommending that the city include a line item in the budget for senior programming. We would suggest that a placeholder be inserted of some $100,000 per year, while announcing a request for proposals process to provide senior programming for Sammamish. This would be consistent with other services provided financial support by way of line items in the budget. The Kokanee Work Group line item is some $40,000 per year, plus the capital projects on local streams that have reached millions of dollars. There are line items for the Sammamish Symphony funding, as well as Friends of Lake Sammamish. There's a placeholder in the 2022 budget of $5 million for a second Inglewood Middle School multipurpose field. In 2021, there was a transfer of $9 million from the general fund to the Transportation Capital Improvement Program. In summary, in support of fulfilling a huge void in programming for senior activities in Sammamish, we respectfully request the council to insert a line item in the budget for senior programming and move forward with requesting proposals to provide this senior programming. With the large City of Sammamish biennial budget, there certainly is sufficient flexibility to address the needs of over a quarter of our population over age 50. Thank you for your attention and for your service to the residents of Sammamish.
Thank you.
Chair, resident since 1979.
I will now promote the second caller. Please state your name and city of residence at the beginning of your comments.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Adarsh Kumarapan, and I live in Sammamish near the City Hall. I am a 17-year-old rising senior at Skyline High School, and I have been a sustainability ambassador since my junior year. I care about sustainability because it is a highly effective way to promote the well-being of our planet, our city, and future generations. Being an active sustainability ambassador has given me a way to understand how imperative it is that we become sustainable while allowing me to increase my impact. Thank you for your past work on developing the environment and conservation section and putting it in the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan. It's great that Sammamish has a plan so that we can move forward on important steps towards becoming a more sustainable city. However, there is still more for us to do. All of us have been directly impacted by climate change, from the heat dome last summer, which resulted in over 100 heat-related deaths in 1 week, to the frequent wildfires, which resulted in unhealthy air. Personally, I am an outdoorsy person and was very unhappy at not being able to go outside much due to the poor air quality. I know we can do something about climate change, but we need to act now. What we need is a climate action plan, a measurable, actionable framework for reducing our city's carbon emissions. Issaquah has one, Redmond has one, Kirkland has one, Newcastle has one. What about Sammamish? Also, we need a plan to establish a youth board so youth may have a greater role in moving the needle. Time and time again, youth have been shown to have great power in pushing for change towards sustainability and bringing about progress. One of the many benefits of a youth board is that youth can alert others of the issues that they face so they can bring about more awareness of more sustainability-related issues. This shows the potential a youth board has for our city. We ask that the council initiate the construction of a climate action plan. Furthermore, we ask that the council establish a youth board. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I will now promote the third caller. Mary Wichter.
Hi, I'm Mary Wichter. I've been in Sammamish 20 years. And yes, James, I'm for less executive sessions and more action to James Eastman, who spoke earlier. I'm also in support of what the seniors are asking, so hope you really give consideration and full consideration to that and also for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But tonight I wanted to speak on the stormwater rate study paper number 3. I had sent in an email earlier. I just wanted to summarize a few things. The most optimal strategy for funding stormwater things is the use of grants and using ratepayers who pay annual swim fees or surface water management fees, which are collected by the county with property taxes and provided to the city. Also using cash financing, which is done as a pay-as-you-go. That's been working really well. In 2017-18, the most recent stormwater rate study had set increases to the fees, and that's been providing sufficient revenue for stormwater projects and also stormwater capital improvement projects. And those have been listed in the stormwater capital improvements projects for 2016 to 2022, which it looks like that will be updated. Hooray. Debt financing is not recommended, and anytime you have stormwater fees, they have to be used for stormwater. They can't be used for other things. LIDs and ULIDs really are not recommended. I've also been attending Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District meetings, and while ULIDs were used in the past, they really aren't passing, and you're going to find it's a difficult hurdle for capital improvement projects because it's really hard to judge the benefit based on the value, and you can end up with everybody either voting it down and or challenging the rates done. What has been working is in 2016, it was a giant year for stormwater, a really big year, because we were moving from 1998 and 2009 code, and there were lots of people, multitudes of people over many months who asked for enhanced level of service instead of just the basic. And what I remember from that is that basic really just let the city do what was required, responding to problems and emergencies, but after they occurred, which is often more costly. The example is the mudslide, landslide that happened on Lewis Thompson in 2015, took 3 to 4 years to fix and $1.3 million. That was just a clogged culvert. So the city does culverts and ditches now. And it's not really clear in the consultants thing. I think all the enhanced level of services from the 2016 comp plan are added, and then they've added a few more, and most of those looked fairly good to me, but it is important to get a little bit more granularity on those, so maybe you can ask about those tonight. Anyway, the real way to go with stormwater is you need to know what projects you need to do. You need to do the studying, rank them, order them, put them on the project list, and then ask for grants. And in my email, I provided all the grants that we've been getting. You can get them for fish, for water quality, for lack of flooding or to reduce flooding, and that will help the people, the wildlife, the fish, the streams, and the safety. So thank you very much for the time this evening, and good luck.
Thank you.
I will now promote the next commenter.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Aditi Kamrupan, and I live less than 3 minutes away from the town center in Renaissance Bridge. I'm 15 years old and a rising sophomore at Skyline High School. I've also been a member of Sustainability Ambassadors, abbreviated SA, since the summer of 2020, and I've learned a lot from the organization, as well as spread learnings to my family and peers. Sustainability is a major issue. My generation will have to live with the repercussions for years if we don't all work together to obtain a sustainable lifestyle and a sustainable world. I care about sustainability because it affects my future. Throughout my lifetime, we have already felt many effects of climate change, including the long stretch of summer without rain a few years ago, and the heat wave from just last summer, which was especially hard for my family because we do not have an AC built into our home. Membership in SA has helped me advance sustainability through my home and school life, showing me how important it is to become sustainable and how easy it is with simple steps. Thank you for the development of the Urban Forest Management Plan back in 2019. It's great that Sammamish has a plan so that we can move forward on important steps by keeping our city green. I have a very close connection to trees. I've spent my whole life biking by lines of them and watching the wind drift through the evergreens in my backyard. It's important that our city stays green because of the countless advantages that such an action carries, such as cleaner air and reducing stormwater runoff volumes. Thank you. So we currently have an urban forest management plan, but we need more than just this. We need a climate action plan, just like the other cities have, as it will bring benefits such as cleaner air, lower energy costs because of efficiency, and green jobs. So our ask is this. We would ask that while a climate action plan is being developed, the city implement a climate dashboard on its website as well. It would be similar to Issaquah's climate dashboard and would reflect Sammamish's progress in sustainable development. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for considering our request.
Thank you.
I will now promote the next commenter.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Kieran John, and I've lived in Sammamish near Pine Lake Middle School for the last 10 years. I'm 14 years old, a rising sophomore at Skyline High School, and a member of Sustainability Ambassadors, where I've worked as a part of the Sammamish team since the summer of 2020. I care about sustainability because it has a direct effect on the daily lives of our community members, and issues will only worsen with time if left unaddressed. Just last year, the number of wildfires in Washington state doubled from the year before, and over 480,000 acres of land were burned compared to 38,000 in 2020. The same summer, over 150 people died of heat-related illnesses. Being a part of Sustainability Ambassadors has helped me by giving me a platform to spread methods of furthering sustainability on a household-to-household level, while also developing my knowledge of what needs to change on a larger scale. Thank you for the development of the Environment and Conservation section of the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan. It is encouraging to see that an effort is already being made to advance sustainability, but is imperative that the city goes further. The current list of goals and policies often uses words like encourage and improve without setting quantifiable standards of growth. As of today, there is nothing being done to measure the progress the city has made towards meeting the objectives written out in the comprehensive plan. We ask you to conduct regular audits to benchmark and track our city's conditions so that we are held accountable for our goals. Sammamish needs a climate action plan, a detailed, quantifiable framework focused on protecting our city's environment. Issaquah has one, Kirkland has one, Redmond has one, Newcastle has one. Why not us? As we take steps to combat climate change, there are additional benefits, like a decrease in health issues, an influx in green jobs, cleaner air, lower energy costs, and a greater efficiency in public transportation. We ask that the City Council begins to track the project towards the goals set in the comprehensive plans, and we urge you, as the policymakers of our city, to develop a climate action plan for our generation and those to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more commenter I will now promote. Mr. Stickney.
Good evening, City Council members. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. Kudos to all the speakers tonight. Agree with all the senior and sustainability comments this evening. Send in an email today. I'm not going to speak to anything in part one. Those speak for themselves. In regards to part two of the email I sent today, I'm going to shake it up and start with my conclusion. Land use directions underpin most everything. Desired outcomes enabled by how we use our land are paramount. Which land use approaches add the most enrichments for our residents and city in balanced, holistic, sustainable ways? To decide this, we need to inform and then determine which direction. Now I want to speak about getting some key data that begins a process to inform. In last week's meeting, I sent a page that listed over 120 housing gaps. We need all that information. Today, I sent in a subsequent page that showed in the 2003 comp plan, we knew precisely how to get exact shortage housing gaps for 3 income categories. We could apply that to all economic and demographic groups. I sent earlier an outline without the detail, 3 examples to illustrate why all housing gaps matter. 1, we have over 43 intersections we measure for concurrency, all 4 ways. That's over 170 numbers. What if we only measured about 20 and lumped all the rest into one category? Next, on the budget, we have over 900 line items. What if we only precisely knew about 100 and lumped over 800 into one category? Another example, wetlands. We have over 100 in the city. What if we did exact ratings on 10, but we lumped 90 into one category? Answer, we can't manage what we don't measure and understand. So we need the housing data to the same level as those other topics. How is Sammamish different than other peer cities? 1, their housing supplies in general are far more balanced for the residents that live in those communities. 2, their economic and demographic makeup is less top-heavy, and the GMA calls for meeting all needs. And 3rd, their growth targets, relatively speaking, are far larger, so they can meet internal needs where ours is too small to do so. I'm not saying we meet every need we find. I'm saying we need to know the needs to inform housing numbers and policies.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
I see no more commenters. Back to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Trine, did you have?
Yeah, it might be smart of us to make, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor, is to direct the city manager to send some information to the sustainable ambassadors to just explain to them what is available for them as far as the youth boards go. They talked
Yeah,
about
sounds
that we
good.
don't have a youth board, and I'm just saying, yeah, we do. So it might be in our best interest to have the city manager just send a note out to them just to let them know what is available for them.
Cool.
On that front.
That sounds good.
Is that all right with you, Scott?
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see your hand earlier. Next, I think we're at executive session now. Yeah, so next we have an executive session, potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. Looks like we're anticipating about 15 minutes and no action. And our city attorney is just out this week, but we do have a sub from Ogden Murphy Wallace. So Andrew is with us this week.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I think if we are back at 7:20, well, let's just do 7:25 in case for turnover time. And we'll be back then. Thank you. Okay, we are back, 7:30. Next, I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, by a vote of 6-0, consent passes. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback. Next, we have unfinished business. So, Scott, should I pass this one to you for the DEIB program?
Certainly, Mayor, and thank you. And Lita will be promoting Mark Barrett, our Administrative Services Director, to present this item. Council will recall that we discussed this 2 weeks ago, and Council gave some direction. So Mark is coming back as the follow-up, looking for Council approval of the resolution. Mark, turning it over to you.
Can everybody hear me okay? Was that I didn't hear anybody. Am I coming through?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. As Scott mentioned, I'm back here this evening for another bit of an update on the DEIB program and consideration for the proposed DEIB program resolution. In the next few minutes, I will briefly walk through a little bit of background on DEIB programs, talk about the council feedback that we received from the July 5th meeting, take a look at where we amended the resolution per that feedback that we received from council, touch on the first steps in developing a program, and talk about the resources needed. So the city has some aspects of a DEIB or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging program already in place. Some examples of this are our procurement policies, verbiage in our bidding procedures, equal opportunity employer language, harassment and discrimination policies, implicit bias training that we're currently in the process of rolling out across the city for all employees, and the recognition of different groups and programs and activities that happen throughout the city. But there's no formal program that knits all of that together. You know, program is an organized, intentional process that is consistently moving an organization's DEIB strategies forward towards completion, and also assessing their impact against the goals that the organization wishes for them to have.
Hey,
And as a
Mark,
reminder that, yes.
can I pause you for a moment? Were you planning on throwing a PowerPoint up?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it, on my side it is. I apologize.
No, that's all right. Just wanted to double check.
Let me see what I can do here. All right, are you seeing that? Is that a yes? Did I lose everybody?
No, we're here.
Okay, can you see the PowerPoint?
No. Or can you email it to Lita or Scott and they can present it?
Let me see if I can throw it up on my screen. Hang on one second.
Yeah, I apologize.
'Cause I don't think we have it in our packet.
Let me try. How about now?
Yes. Now you got us.
Apologize. If I hadn't been here before, I would have claimed new guy status, but since I pulled it off the last time, I clearly did something. So I apologize. So to pick it back up after talking about what a program is, a DEI program is a high priority for council. A little bit of background on DEIB and formal programs. They serve to a whole host of positive influences, both across the community and within an organization. It improves decision-making that better represents all communities within a jurisdiction, increases community trust in local government, promotes a more equitable distribution of public resources, can serve to improve employee satisfaction, reduce staff turnover, which is a big and important issue for the city, and increase employee engagement. When we first came and talked on the 5th of July with council, council provided some feedback on the DEIB program, and in particular, there were comments that showed that council was very interested in DEIB programs' interaction with the community itself. And they really wanted this element to be prominent in the development of a program, and also desired some amendments to the resolution that reflected this. And so we went back and we made some amendments to the resolution in a couple of different places. Several whereas clauses were added, specifically that the city values the diverse community that it serves. The city places a high value on its relationship with the various communities that reside within its jurisdiction. That the city wishes to ensure that it prioritizes DEIB in all aspects of its business, including the services, policies, programs, and initiatives provided to the community. Additionally, we made some edits to the direction and intention portion that gave some further direction to the city manager. One in particular was the addition of section 3 that states the city manager is directed to look for and take advantage of opportunities to extend DEIB program principles to the community through the services, policies, programs, and initiatives provided by the city. And there were adjustments made to the 4th section that added language to ensure that the plan included the city's internal working environment and its interaction with the community. So really, to get started in the city of Sammamish with the DEIB program, the first step is really to consider passing this DEIB resolution. It establishes the strong policy statement that DEIB principles are an important thing to the city. It directs the city manager to prioritize these DEIB principles in budgeting and policy development. It extends DEIB program principles to the community through the services, policies, programs, and initiatives, and directs the city manager to create a plan for implementing a DEIB program that includes the internal city environment and externally with its interaction with the community. Initial work in 2022 can be done with existing resources and administrative services. Many of these are about organizations deciding about putting together a staff and/or community group that will help guide the effort to help create the program. However, additional resources are going to be needed for the bulk of the DEIB program, and council should anticipate a budget package dedicated to the city's DEIB effort in the upcoming budget process. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Council, I'll open it up. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Thanks, Mark, for your work. I'm glad to see the additional sections. I just had a quick question regarding the budget for next year. Are you looking at, are there grants available to operationalize these DEI efforts?
There are several entities that provide some real guidance and professional services on putting these together. Some of them we are members with through HR connections, and we have some opportunity to leverage some resources at a modest or no cost. I think that that's a great idea going forward. Some of it has to do with some timing. Given that it's a priority for council, we really want to be able to get started. And it's a process that you start and you build on, almost continuously as you assess if you're attaining your goals, taking a look at metrics. So I think that there is some room for that in both program development and in the ongoing maintenance of such a program. At this time, I don't have a particular one that I know of to put in for, but I will certainly add that to program development and begin to take a look at that if that's a desire.
That would be great. Thank you.
Councilmember Howe.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for your work, and I appreciate it very much. I have two quick questions. First of all, around the budget question that you'll be coming back and asking for. Are you thinking that this is going to be a training budget, or are you thinking this may look like staff? And if staff, are you thinking FTE or consultant? So that's one question.
I will take it first then. It's a block of money. It could be either one or yes to all of the above. Part of the early work that is done will be to kind of assess where we are as an organization. And, you know, as we heard some public comment on exactly what we want to do and how we want to build the program, I think it makes sense that we'll need some professional help to do that. It may make sense for that to be, you know, a program manager type of an individual. I am told that they are difficult to find with this expertise and don't come cheap. And so it may make more sense to use some consultant money. There's some good local entities out there that provide this to local jurisdictions and have to some of our neighbors, and that may be a more effective way to do it. I think we will probably be looking for some flexibility to see which makes the most sense for where we're at development.
I see. Thank you for that. And my second question has to do with the metrics. It's possible you had this on a slide and I missed it, but do you anticipate creating a baseline? Because I do find that is helpful to know if you know where you're starting from and have a vision of where you're going to, doing that gap analysis is easier because you know where you're starting from.
Absolutely. I think that that's probably part of the early work that gets done, both with the staff to know where they believe that they are at and where the organization is at, but also with some community representation to see where they think the city is at, so we can go from there. That's part of that early work that will lead to the development and will allow the program to build around what comes out of those questions.
Thank you.
I thought I saw your hand. Okay, good. Oh, good. Is there any other questions? Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, so seems to me there's two items missing from the resolution. So one is that there's no way to measure. So I don't know if that's part of still the plan part of it, which is at the end, but it seems to me that's definitely missing. And then the definition of the terms. Mark, is that something that is part of the plan as well, that when they go to develop the program, that the definitions of the terms and their meaning would be defined?
You correct on both counts. It's very typical that the groups that help guide the process take a look and really ultimately define the terms. There are many good definitions of those terms out there. At the last time I spoke with council, I provided a couple of slides that had some samples of them, but they may or may not be the ones that ultimately the people that are really helping drive this put together. But it will be important to have those definitions, because you can't develop a program that takes those things into account unless you know what you're talking about. So that is very important. Second of all, when it comes to the measures, that will depend on the elements of the program that get put into place. And those metrics will be developed early on as the program becomes developed with the input. You may recall the resolution really directs the city manager to begin to put together the plan that will include the metrics in order to bring the program to fruition.
Right. So, I mean, I'm reading section 4 there of the resolution and I understand that. And I imagine that then for the city manager, the internal may be easier. That none of this is easy, though. I get that, Scott. I've been working on this for 11 years in the school district. So, but the external, do we have is the idea that we're going to include not only the city, but also our interaction with our neighboring cities and the region? Okay, just go King County then, from that point. And then what might that look like?
Councilmember Treen, that's a great question. I think that part of what Mark is describing is a process to identify how big the scope will be, how far of a reach we want, and how it might be set up and look like. I think you are presenting one of the challenges that we've been working with internally up until this point, which is how do you get started? And what's the right approach? And so what we're proposing is, in essence, that council set a broad policy basis to say this is important and here are the things that we feel are important. And then we're going to go and take that direction and try to build on that and come up with and try to answer those questions. And I think the internal work that Mark is describing for the rest of this year will be trying to get us to that point where we can then say whether it's additional staff or a consultant or whoever to come in and help guide us along that path. Rather than presuppose what the outcome is going to be or what the solution is. I think our sense is that we need to work through that and get a lot of input from internal and external partners.
Thank you.
Councilmember Indapure.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say again how important this work is, and I'm so glad to see this resolution. I especially want to acknowledge that this work really got a lot of momentum after the events of May 25th, 2020, with the killing of George Floyd. So really want to acknowledge that. I think the city manager had a very interesting question, where do we start? I think with DEI work, I think we all have to start from ourselves first. And I think that is where I really would encourage all of us to start. And how do we start at our own levels? You know, not only to be more welcoming of diverse thoughts, how do we include, create a sense of belonging, but also I think for me what is really important is to acknowledge our unconscious bias and really, work through them. So I think training for ourselves, for the staff, for the community is going to be very important. Having open dialogue is also going to be very important. And I think as we go through, to envisioning how DEIB looks in our community, I would say we should also pay very close attention to what kinds of people we invite into giving us that training. Because I think that is also very important for me. So really support this resolution. And again, starting with, how can the city work on it internally and externally as well. So thank you.
Councilmember Treen.
Well, with that being said, thank you. I move that the resolution, whatever number we're going to give it to, of the City of Sammamish, Washington, committing to and establishing a process to move forward with the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, otherwise known as the DEIB program, moves forward.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Councilmember Treen, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think Ritu just said it, Councilmember said it really clearly. Is first we have to start with ourselves and understand who we are and where we have errors or challenges of our own upbringing, and sometimes stuff that doesn't even, that we're not even aware of, that was instilled into us as young children. So that would be the first goal that we would have to be working towards. And then how the city then also would do that is looking internally into itself as a city and working a program that would help the staff, council, and boards address those issues, and then turning it outward and addressing the community in which we live in, which would be the city of Sammamish. And my hope would be that this would also then move to the next level, which would also push out towards King County, and that we would be seen as somebody who's dealing with this and working towards diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for everyone, and maybe even for all, which one of our one of the public comments was about we should consider about life itself. And so I encourage us to all vote, approve this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Farrell, did you have a comment on the motion on the floor?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how much I support this also. When I think of equity and inclusion, particularly I think of special needs. And I want to make sure that group is a group that as we do some community outreach, that we make sure that group is also included in our discussions. And they also to remember that this is quite a diverse community that we have, and that all members of our community are brought into our community outreach. And when we put together that advisory board, that everyone, or as many people as possible, are represented. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. All right, Council. All those in favor for passing this resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, by a vote of 6-0, that resolution, I think R 2022-963. Thank you all. I know I have lots of questions when you guys come back, so thank you, Mark.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, next we have the stormwater rate study, and I believe that's Audrey.
Good evening, Council. Just wanted to make sure that you can hear me. Okay, perfect. Stephanie Sullivan will be joining me tonight. And before I begin, I guess I can introduce myself. I apologize. Audrey Starseed, and I am the Acting Public Works Director. Stephanie Sullivan will be presenting along with me this evening. She is our Senior Stormwater Program Manager. And Tagi Acker will be joining us for the fourth portion of the presentation this evening. So give me a moment, please, while I share my screen. Okay, and hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Oops, sorry. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we do have a few parts to this presentation this evening. The first portion, I just wanted to provide Council the opportunity to ask any questions they may have about how stormwater billing works. Just have a few slides there. Most of the information is in the agenda packet for the evening, so I just wanted to provide that question opportunity. Second and third parts of the presentation will be led by Stephanie and I, and we are just hoping to gather some feedback from Council this evening. This feedback will help us to form our levels of service for the rate model that we'll bring back to you in September. And the fourth part of the evening's discussion will be about the third issue paper for this rate study, and that will be presented by FCS Group and led by Tagi Acker. So just a really quick high-level overview of stormwater billing. This is the primary revenue source for the stormwater utility. The utility is housed within the Public Works Department of the city. These are fees that are guided by strategies and plans, all which are set by council. Our rate studies intend to project revenue for 6 to 10 years that would entirely fund the utility. So salaries, benefits, our operations, and our capital programs. And this is a cycle that actually is billed twice a year by King County, as we do not operate our own water sewer utility. So King County does our billing for us. That's why you'll see on your property tax statement that surface water fee twice a year. Just wanted to provide a very quick overview on how those fees transcend into our budget. And you can see here's our budget for this biennium. And then in turn, how this budget turns into a typical work plan for the utility for the year. We do have over 21,000 accounts that we manage along with King County for our billing. And typically our equivalent service unit is 3,500 square feet for each unit. So single family residents are billed 1 ESU. It's a flat rate. Commercial facilities are billed per impervious surface of an ESU. So their rates can vary depending on how much impervious surface they have. And before we get going with our level of service options, I just wanted to see if if there are any questions out there about how billing works and how it supports the utility.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Hi, Audrey. I just had a quick question. It was just on the last slide that we saw. The budget is showing 18 million. How did it double from 2021?
Oh, that's the combined budget. So that's how much we would receive from fees for both years.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands. Please continue.
Okay. So second part of this discussion this evening, we'll be going over some operational programs for you to consider. And before we dive into those, I wanted to take a moment to describe this slide. It's been a consistent slide throughout our presentations, but it's really important to the utility. It really shows those overlapping bubbles that you see in the slide of different colors, how each component of the utility's work can overlap with each other, and also at times how they can be competing needs within the utility itself. Obviously, the utility is structured in a way so that our overall stormwater goals and policies are the things that drive the utility. So those are carried through in comprehensive plans, and then in basin plans, and then in our capital improvement plans. And all while meeting Npds requirement, which is our state guided and regulatory permit that allows us to discharge stormwater into waters of the state. And of course, this evening we'll be discussing levels of service. So we're kind of at that right-hand portion of your screen. And in September, we'll be bringing revenue requirements back to you to get to a level of service. So don't necessarily have to go through this whole slide, but just wanted to provide a really quick overview. Our Npds permit is a permit issued through Department of Ecology, but it's actually a federal permit issued through the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a requirement that the city has to have. And you can see how each permit cycle, which are typically 5 years, how those requirements keep their additive requirements. In each permit cycle, there's more and more requirements. So we already have a few new requirements that we're trying to plan for the next permit cycle. Keeping that in mind, as we are preparing our preliminary budgets for this next budget cycle, we will have a few things that we are planning for both permit requirements that will be increased costs that you'll see as we bring those budgets back this fall to meet our current level of service and current Npds requirements. There'll also be a few things that we have in there that we're trying to prepare for the next the next permit cycle as well. I'll be going through some of these a little bit in detail tonight. And then of course, we'll have opportunity to discuss these in September when we bring the budget cycle back. Of course, with more work plan, there's always a consideration for more staffing. So these are some considerations that we'll be looking at for this particular budget cycle and then trying to plan ahead for more requirements headed our way. So just want to keep that in mind. And as we discuss level of service this evening, we're not asking you to commit to a level of service, but just keep in mind as we discuss these programs, along with that often means that we'll need more staff resources to implement the program at a higher level of service. So we have a handful of programs that we'll just describe to you tonight. Most of these are currently offered by the utility, and some of these are required by our permit. Others are called out in our comprehensive storm and surface water plan that was last updated in 2016. First one we wanted to go through with you is our basin planning efforts. So this is not a requirement of our permit. This is something that was called out in our 2016 storm and surface water utility as an important thing to do. This is an enhanced level of service. This is something that we currently provide. And typically each plan takes about 2 years to prepare and finalize. So we are currently on track to complete one plan every 2 years. There is an opportunity to increase that frequency if council so desires to have 2 plans every 2 years. Basin plans are extremely important to the utility. It is kind of a report card or a health check for water quality. It's something that can be done in between our overall comprehensive plans, which are typically done every 10 years or so. Pond mowing is something that is in one way required by our permit. We need to be able to access the pond. We need to be able to make sure that each stormwater pond is functioning as designed. So we currently mow every single pond in the city once per year. We have, I believe, over 400 ponds. Stephanie's online and could probably correct that number for me, but we do have quite a few ponds. Our current contract. We do contract this out. A lot of smaller and medium-sized cities do contract for this service, and currently our contract price is about $242,000 a year for this work. We have offered a few other levels of service for council to consider. The options below simply kind of provide bookends. We can certainly provide different things in between if you wanted to go with a lower amount. The most I think that we could reasonably accommodate would be mowing a pond 3 times a year, but as you can see, that very quickly adds to that operating budget every year. We do receive quite a few requests every summer, typically in July, to mow the ponds more often. And we just wanted to be also very clear as we discuss this operational program that any additional mowing would not conflict with our Adopt a Pond program. It's a really important program to us. So next, another program we wanted to go over with you, and we'll have a summary slide at the end of all the programs so we can talk about them all together. But our next program is our source control program. This is a new permit requirement for this permit cycle. We are just getting our business inventory together. We have consultants on board. They'll be starting inspecting their inspections in January of 2023. So right now, the permit requires us to do that baseline amount, 20 inspections a year and about 10 re-inspections of businesses. So this program is really intended to reduce that source point pollution that may come from a business. It's truly intended to have an education foot forward first, and then follow up with enforcement if education is not working with our business partners. We have offered a few options for council's consideration for this program as well. We are strongly recommending, if you would like to move forward with an enhanced or an optimum level of service, that maybe try that out in year 2025 and give us a few years to ramp up the program as it is a new program, and make sure that we're addressing any things that may need to be addressed as we're implementing that program. And I just wanted to point out with some of these programs that get to that optimum level, I think it would be a better value for the city to bring in an FTE to run that program versus contracting out some of our services that we currently do. And this is just a collection of a few other programs. I wanted to make sure to run through some of our water quality efforts that we do provide. There's one item on this list that is a requirement through our permit. All of our other requirements or all of our other monitoring efforts that we currently provide are an enhanced level of service. Something that we'll be discussing in our budget cycle this fall as well is our fish passage barrier assessment. So that's kind of a one-time assessment. So we truly can strategically look at the entire city for fish passage barriers and make a plan to mitigate those barriers. And then another program that was also called out as an enhanced level of service in our last comp plan was our ditch maintenance program. It's gone very well. We typically budget $150,000 to $200,000 a year and complete two miles of ditching work a year. The other program we wanted to introduce to you this evening, this is an entirely new program for your consideration. This is not a requirement of our permit, but it is something that, again, was recommended in our comp plan. And the utility is recommending that we begin to camera our pipes. So creating a storm pipe condition assessment on the operational side and pair that with the storm pipe rehabilitation program on the capital side to repair any pipes that we may find that may need to be repaired. Hopefully our pipes are in perfect condition and don't look like the picture on the slide. But this is really a proactive program intended to, like I said, camera our older pipes and get ahead of those asset replacements ahead of schedule before they fail. I know I presented you with a lot of information and a lot of things to think about, a lot of different programs. This slide was presented to you so you could see quickly how all of these programs and efforts can really add up both each year as well as within a 6-year time span, which is kind of what we plan to for our rates. So the items highlighted in turquoise are our level of efforts that we're doing right now. So you can see they span both that baseline level of service, which would be that bare minimum that we would need to meet our permit requirements, and an enhanced level of service. So different things for you to consider as we go forward. We certainly, you don't have to answer today, but we are hoping that one, to collect some feedback on some of these programs, see if we can answer any questions for these programs, and see if you concur with our staff recommendation to maintain status quo, just kind of a split between the baseline and enhanced level of service, with the addition of the items on the right, which is a fish passage barrier assessment and beginning that storm pipe condition assessment. So with that, it's kind of the end of our second part of the presentation. I know it was a lot of information. I'm happy to answer questions before we move on to the capital program.
All right, Councilmember Train.
Hey, Audrey. First, how many adopted ponds or how many ponds have been adopted? Do we know?
That is a great question. Stephanie, are you on the line, and do you happen to know?
You can get.
I am on the line. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Treen. I know it's at least a handful, but I would have to look back at our information to get a factual answer.
And then kind of tying into that, how about the drains, adopting drains? I know there was a big push and we had a good turnout. Are we about half or a third of the drains in the city being adopted, or is it, what's the percentage?
I don't have that percentage, but I know it's a really good number, and we actually needed to expand that program more than we had anticipated. So I apologize. I'll have to get back to you with those numbers.
That's okay. So part of my question is just to bring that to the public's attention, to say, hey, adopt these stormwater ponds, adopt your drains that are right on your property, and help us out. The second one was the basin plans. If I understood you correctly, you said that isn't part of our level of service?
It's not the baseline. So
okay.
The baseline, the bare minimum is we wouldn't embark on any basin planning. It is something that was recommended as an enhanced item in the 2016 comprehensive plan.
So the reason why we're doing basin plans is because it's part of our comp plan?
Yes.
And then your professional opinion, would that be something that you would advise the council that that's something that should continue?
Yes, we are recommending to continue with our basin planning efforts as our status quo, what we have been doing, which is an enhanced level of service. So one plan every 2 years. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to look at a basin's health. And part of the things that come out of that is a list of our capital projects that we would need to embark on to help with a variety of different things that may come about from that. It's kind of a report card for the basin.
I think it'd be then cost. Then if you could bring forward the cost for those. I know each one's unique and different, but if you just give us like kind of a range of what we've paid in the past with inflationary numbers, give us a range of what it might cost to continue that program of basin planning. Storm pipe assessments. That's brand new. So and I'm all for that. I think it's a good idea. Because it's proactive. So I like it because it's proactive. But to add to that, and I don't have an answer here, or how about being proactive as well on our vaults? Because they're filter systems to filter the water, to make the water so it's clean. And so we know on our refrigerators, the filters go bad and have to be changed out. And I know, I have a feeling we haven't set aside any money to maintain the vaults that are in the city. And so being proactive and setting aside monies to do a study to realize what condition our vaults are in and what may be the hazardous waste cost to removing those and replacing the filters would be something that I'd be interested in as well when looking at level of service.
And I can actually speak to that. That's something that we currently do. A lot of our filters are made by one or two manufacturers. They do come with a manufacturer's recommendation. So the filters that I'm thinking of right now, it depends on the type of filtration media in there and how much it's all engineered, how much we anticipate the pollutant loading going into that system. And we do inspect our vaults, including our filters, every year and replace as needed.
So is that just a general budget thing then, or is that being paid through these fees?
The stormwater fees covers everything that the utility does. So one of our inspectors does inspect all of our filtration systems, and if they are replaced, when they are replaced, which is fairly often, comes out of our operational budget for a wait.
Thank you. That's all.
Councilmember Howe?
Thank you. I was trying to understand. Could you go to the next slide, please, for a second?
Sure.
Okay. So you're suggesting, and I know we're not reaching a decision here tonight, but I just want to get a little bit more clarity on the FTE role. Would that new person then, would they do the section that's marked as add? I mean, I'm trying to understand their job exactly, or what one person would do given what you're proposing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so right now we will likely be asking for FTEs within the department. Portions of those may end up being paid for by the utility if they are approved. But the current items on this slide, most of these are currently items that we are able to absorb within our current workload. The additional items we would need to reassess. We are planning on likely needing another FTE regardless of level of service in 2025 to accommodate new permit requirements.
I see. Well, I was just going to comment briefly about the Stormwater Stewards, who are, of course, a fabulous group of volunteers who are lonely and could use more support, I think, and just more aid. I would love it, frankly, if HOAs all adopted the stormwater ponds within their units or jurisdictions, if you will. And even if the city got behind something like almost a competition, if you will, about the best design, the most attractive, the best natural habitat restoration project, and have that take off. But it's going to need some support because the stormwater stewards are, I'm quite sure, fatigued, and I think that they need more support. And that if that's a place that we can maybe pull from residents, that would be ideal. Have we ever done anything as a city to support that particular organization?
Stephanie, would you like to speak to the storm stewards?
I don't have a lot of background on it at this point. I know our engineering technician in the stormwater division does a lot of work with the stormwater steward to support them, and works with those groups that come forward as part of the Adopt a Pond program. And we've also recently had assistance from the Parks Department with, I don't know his role, position specifically, but we have been working interdepartmentally, which has been really great to support that kind of effort. I would share, I think, that even with groups adopting ponds and providing that support, it wouldn't take away the necessary maintenance work that would still be required to ensure that the ponds would be functioning as well. So mowing and removal of trees in certain areas of the ponds would still be required.
Okay, that's too bad, but but thank you for that, Stephanie. I appreciate the answer.
And I can add a little bit to that too. I believe this last year we did kind of redesign our Adopt a Pond program based on the first few years that it was implemented. So it's a really great program. We're hoping that it can complement our maintenance, but as Stephanie was alluding to, we still have quite a bit of maintenance needs that we have to do for NPDS. So it would be a complementary efforts there.
Councilmember Farrell?
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Audrey. Very nice to meet you, and it's a very interesting subject. I just wanted to bring attention to Mary Wichter's comments that she made tonight at a public comment. I spent many years on the Planning Commission listening to Mary make many presentations on the subject, and in my humble opinion, I consider her kind of one of our local experts, as I'm sure you probably do too. And I take note of anything that she may say on this subject. And she did make a comment tonight about stormwater projects that may be needed, and that we rank order them in order of importance and make sure we're asking for grants for those. I'm sure that's possibly something that you guys do as part of your order of business, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. And if Mary says something like that, it always makes me sit up and take notice. And then all the other great feedback that she gave us today on this issue, as I'm sure she sent it in to you guys too, and especially the pursuit of grants that really could help the city out in kind of beefing up this infrastructure. So it was just really by way of a comment, Audrey. I just wanted to highlight things that she has sent in to us and just make sure that we're taking note of her opinions and her expertise. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Councilmember Napure.
Thank you. Hi, Audrey. I have a couple questions. First of all, are we, for the pond maintenance and the mowing, are we also supposed to like maintain the grass? Or again, I want to take this opportunity. I know other council members have done that. I know I've met the folks who work on the Stormwater Stewards, and they do an amazing job. And I think what really attracts me to that is creating an ecosystem, right? Like instead of just having grass and mowing it down, creating a real ecosystem which really enhances our environment. So at least the picture that you showed, it just showed grass. Is that something that's just easy to do and that's why we do that? Or like, can the city start working towards creating a natural habitat for those ponds? And is that allowed under the NDPIS?
That's a great question. So there are very specific guidelines that we do require, both with our drainage and design manual that was recently adopted through our permit, as well as our public works standards. So the primary function, or the primary reason for the pond, is we need to make sure that it functions. So that's why a lot of times you'll see that grass side slope. It's there to make sure the slope is stable. Oftentimes you'll see a flat part of the upper pond. That's actually often an access road. So when we need to get to those outlet structures, you can think of the pond as kind of a big bathtub. So when we need to get to that overflow and those outlets in an emergency, or actually any time to inspect it, to clean it, we need to be able to make sure we can get a big truck out there and not have the infrastructure of the ponds be compromised. So that's really the main driver. Oftentimes it is, I would say, probably beneficial to have shorter grass, just to be able to inspect it easily. So that would be a consideration to, if more and more of our ponds are adopted, it's a really wonderful thing. We really value the habitat it can create, but we would just need to be cognizant of that may lead to a little bit longer inspection times, just making sure that there's not rodent, burrows in the sides of the dam and different things that could compromise the functionality. So it is something that really could go hand in hand, but the primary, maintenance, just for the pond mowing alone, just once a year, it is a pretty big cost.
Right. My second question is on the source control program slide, if you could go to that.
Yes.
So firstly, I just want to call out the lovely art that you've included in that. I think, I don't know if it was done by students here or part of any outreach work, but you talk about the code updates that need to be done by August 1st, and I was just curious about what that meant. Is that something that the Planning Commission is also involved in, or is it something that you just do on your own?
That's a great question. We were able to, this portion of the program is actually complete. We were able to be a little bit more efficient with this particular update that was required by our permit. And complete those updates as part of our code updates that were required for our new design drainage manual, the King County Stormwater Design Manual. So those were already done and already completed, so it went through Planning Commission and everything.
Wonderful. And then for the education, do we ever partner with our local schools here in educating them about these reducing and preventing runoffs?
We do have some education programs. I think Stephanie has some really great details, so feel free to chime in. We do have Kokanee Education Day and a variety of different things that we partner with. The education needed for this program is really providing that opportunity to our business partners in the community. Sometimes there may or may not be, higher turnover, so making sure that these inspections happen often enough and that we can provide that outreach, just that reminder that those drains in the parking lot, they drain right to the lake. They're not sewer, and also providing that outreach for things that they can do on an operational level. Might be simple as closing your dumpster lid at the end of the day to reduce the pollutants going into the system.
Right. Sorry, my last question. With the storm pipe, I know we're trying to be proactive. I was just wondering, have other cities started doing that? And again, my last overarching comment on the whole even stormwater is going to be climate change. How do we make sure we look at all these through the lens of climate change? Thank you.
So great questions. Regarding the pipe condition assessment, a lot of local cities have embarked on this program. It is really something, like I said, it's proactive. We're hoping to replace the pipe that needs to be replaced, the day before it does. But that's not quite realistic. So we want to make sure, though, that we can get the most out of our pipes that are in the ground. There's some really great technology out there now that involves trenchless technology, where we can go in and line the pipes. So it's really, but first we need to know their condition, right? So to see how we can either repair them or those pipes that aren't candidates for that trenchless repair would require the street to be dug up, right? And then you're getting into possibly utility conflicts and an open road and more costly. So the sooner we can kind of have that condition of what our pipes may look like, we may be able to provide a less expensive option by lining the inside of them without having to dig up the road. And the numbers that were actually provided by a consulting firm that works with several other cities. So that price point is pretty accurate. That would include the engineering services to camera 2.5 years. 2.5 miles a year or 5 miles a year of pipe. They do a really great job going through and assessing that score. It's a national scoring system that's used for water, sewers. There's a lot of different components of the program. And then reviewing the data. I've looked at miles of pipe. It really takes someone special to go through and look through miles and miles of pipe on video, but calling out those defects, so it's a very, very structured process.
All right, I know you have, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know you have one more presentation, but if you could advance to your recommendations, the blue boxes. I'm definitely all for what you all recommended, especially the fish passage. I'm not even gonna try it. That's great. For the storm pond mowing, I feel like I've had this conversation that definitely less is better. So love that. Would rather keep that baseline, especially like with wildfire. I mean, it's mostly surrounded by green, and I don't know how much of a bearing that would have, but definitely love less mowing. And I know there's been talk about, planting native species or something else that could be low, able to be trimmed and maintained. So that's all I had. I think we're good for the last presentation.
Perfect. And thank you for the feedback. We will plan to, like I said, include some of those elements that we heard today into the rate model when we bring that back to you in September. Okay, capital considerations. And this is where there's elements that could be considered for climate change. So I want to make sure I was getting back to your question as well. Before we jump into how we've structured our capital programs and potential levels of service, I just wanted to take the time to provide that high-level glance of how our rate study can overlap or is overlapping with our capital plan as well as the budget process. So it's a really great time to be looking at all three concurrently. Wanted to provide a very quick overview of what that draft capital plan will look like when we bring it back in September and introduce you to a few new capital programs. So first, before I dive into what the capital list looks like, I wanted to share with you how we got to the list. So we did an overhaul, a really thorough review of any projects that were on the city comp plan our 2016 storm comp plan. You can kind of see through the list. We looked at every single thing, every plan that was adopted by council, and reviewed that and put those projects on the list, as well as known maintenance concerns by our teams, as well as areas that we've had drainage complaints or requests. And over to the right, just wanted to really show how, starting at that policy level, how trickling down we get into goals and objectives, how those lead into action items. Those action items can be paired with metrics, and really can produce some really great outcomes for the utility, all of course while meeting our permit requirements. So I know there's a lot on the slide, and it was not really intended to be read, but I just wanted to provide a very high level look at the structure of what our capital plan will look like when we bring it back in September. It should look very familiar to our transportation CIP. It has the same layout. And so what we'll do is make sure that we have over here in this box, orange box, will provide council and the public with, again, how we got the projects on the list. So it'll highlight the origin of the project, what basin it's in, as well as that priority score that was based on the resolution that was identified in the packet. The middle section will then break down into different programs, again, based on staff recommendation, as well as resolution 2018-804. The middle part of that capital list will really show how we could fund these different projects over a 6-year time frame. And then the columns over on the right, which have some highlight at the top, will then tie that into revenue streams for each project and program. So, and obviously when we bring this back in September, we'll make sure that it's a working model and everyone can read it. But just wanted to provide that overview that it will look very similar to our recently adopted TSIP. This criteria was in the agenda packet, but just wanted to run through really quickly how it works and see if we could answer any questions that you may have. So first, our projects are divided into 3 groups based on cost. Then the projects are typically ranked against each other in category using the criteria below. You will see in the second category, there are points assigned to if it addresses climate change. So with each basin plan that we complete, as well as the recently completed retrofit strategy, we use the same criteria, so we have consistent scoring going into our plans. As we are finalizing our draft plans to bring forward to you, we do have quite a few projects that reside in our capital, small drainage capital resolutions program. This really captures projects. Most of them are under 25,000. They can, the maximum that we would consider going into that program is 50,000. Historically, that program has been funded at 200,000 a year. There's an example to the right in our photo of what an example of what that project in that program may do. We're looking at about 15 projects that range in price in that middle price point category, and about 10 to 15 projects in projects that are over 300,000. I do want to point out though that that last list does not include all of the projects in our retrofit program. So we just received the cost estimates back from those, and that program in total is 22.8 million for those projects. Within those groups, it also does not include our newly recommended storm pipe rehabilitation program, our property acquisition fund, or the allocation for the stormwater component of our TSIP. This would be that complement on the capital side. So Fund 438, that was the storm pipe condition assessment program that we described on the operational side, which is Fund 408. This is really we can look at a variety of different ways to fund this program. This is really taking that kind of more detailed look at the different types of repairs that we may find as we start to camera our pipes. And really what we want to look at when we bring back levels of service is setting up funding for this, knowing that we'll likely to find pipes that will need there to be repaired in a timely manner. So this is something that often when cities do start this, they start the funding at a lower amount, something that's reasonable to incorporate into work plans and gradually build up that program over time. Next, we just wanted to highlight another new program that we're recommending is the Stormwater Retrofit Program. Our Retrofit Strategy had 20 projects that were recommended in that. This is a strategy that took a look at flow control and water quality in the city and recommended 20 sites at a minimum to do different things in the different sites. You can see on the project in the right corner, we're actually adding more flow control, adding a second vault to a facility. The map on the upper right shows that we're actually adding stormwater, some more filters into different areas of a neighborhood. So the projects really range in both what the components of the project is, but the overall goal is to provide more water quality treatment and flow control for those areas of the cities that have aging infrastructure that were not designed with current design standards. The cost range for our projects, only one project was less than 300,000. So the rest ranged from 300,000 all the way up to 5.3 million. This is kind of a summary of those projects. We'll have them all highlighted when we bring that draft capital plan back to you in September, but you can really see the range is quite broad. Majority of the projects reside in the Inglewood Basin. And just wanted to provide a quick overview of how the level of service may look as we are combining both the operational programs that we discussed earlier, as well as some capital opportunities. We anticipate that the levels of service may change the most between the enhanced and optimum. You'll see on the screen, it looks pretty similar in terms of the length of the list, but the difference will be how quickly we would choose to fund certain programs. And for example, the pipe rehabilitation program, if we'd like to secure funding for those pipes sooner rather than later, same thing with the retrofits as we're looking at our facilities that need a retrofit. If that's something that's important to council, we can look at strategies to fund those projects sooner. Again, no decisions tonight. We just wanted to check in and see if we have concurrence with our projects and see if there's anything else that you would like us to consider as we build both our capital plan and the rate model to bring back to you in September.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, Audrey. I really appreciate you giving us this spectrum so that we're able to really do a thoughtful process of assessing. I do think that you've done a good job of expanding out the possibilities for us so that we can understand where the money would go, how much it would actually potentially cost a bit. I know that I have an inclination to kind of go towards that middle section, that's where I'm landing right now, particularly because it's got the important elements, maybe just not quite as optimal as you're suggesting. So that would be my initial feedback. And I don't have other criteria that you should consider at this point, as I feel like this is not only sufficient, I think it's a lot. And I think it would be problematic to consider more. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
I just had a question regarding the priority scores. Is that a measurement that we've been using currently, and then the added one is the environmental benefit, or has the environmental benefit always been there? I know you mentioned that you would be adding climate relative to the priority.
So this is criteria that was adopted by council, I believe, in 2018. So any project that has come forward through any adopted plan since then was scored using this criteria. Embedded in that second point category, I believe it's 15 points, is where something that we would address if the project would consider or address the impacts of growth or climate change.
Okay, and so the retrofit program is also based on this as well, right?
Yes, so all of the projects within the retrofit were used scoring this criteria.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Lamb, if I could add, And Audrey, for the code updates that we just did in 2021 for the, well, this year, adopting the 2021 King County Surface Water Design Manual plus the city's Sammamish addendum, it's a mouthful. The Department of Ecology, in looking at updating and adopting the new permit in 2025, will be looking at climate change and possibly extending or forward looking at the data for modeling the projected volume of runoff from new development, so that they may be in the future changing or increasing the required amount of detention on future projects. It's not something they said would not be included in this next permit, but maybe the following cycle.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, can you go to the slide, please? That's the slide right before the storm pipe assessment. Yeah, the one before that.
This one.
What is the so stormwater allocation, TCIP project, $7.4 million. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yes, so this, in the TCIP, we did try to balance the expenditures needed for the TCIP with revenues anticipated. So that 7.4 is a collection of capital projects that are transportation projects that have stormwater components of them that portion of the project would be funded by the stormwater utility. A few examples are the Issaquah Falls City Road flood mitigation section. That's both a transportation and it's a pedestrian safety project as well as a flood mitigation project. Lewis Thompson Road, the project currently under design, is another great example of something that a project that would be have expenditures both in 340 fund as well as the 438 fund.
5 years. So 5 years. Sorry, I'm just trying to do some quick math here too, because I'm thinking about the projects that were on the TCIP over the 6 years and seeing if there was any others that might be included in there. Okay, thank you. How about the slide that was right before the level of service, and it showed a list of the watershed basins.
Oh,
yes.
Yes.
Okay. So how could there be no projects in the Monaghan watershed, which is a pretty significant one, not as large as Inglewood, I get that, but so we have no. Is that because most of Monaghan watershed is it's in the city limits? Any idea why there's no retrofit projects in either one of the Monaghan? I call it Little Monaghan because it's kind of split by Pine Lake Creek. So you have the Little Monaghan and then you have the Monaghan or Monaghan watersheds. There's no projects in any of those.
I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I would need to go back and look up that information. It's in the retrofit strategy on their approach to how the project list was selected in that strategy.
I can speak to it a little bit, actually. So as part of the stormwater retrofit project and assessment, one of the factors was protecting high value watersheds. And so you'll notice the map is color coded. Very high is indicating that resource value of those watersheds. So one of the criteria for developing the project list was to protect those watersheds as opposed to trying to improve a degraded watershed. But we could go get more specific details from that study.
Let me see. Say that again. Stephanie, hi, Ms. Sullivan. Pine Lake, so you said degraded, right? So, because I know Pine Lake is in trouble, right? Like, it needs help. And this is where I'm headed, by the way. There are some clear places in these 3 orange sections that I know of that fail. So is that why they're not on retrofit? Because it actually is going to require a larger scale project and a larger study than what you're looking at on this particular stormwater retrofit program? I get Laughing Jacobs Creek, Thompson, Inglewood, right? I get those ones and why the money would be directed there, because those are the basin plans we've been working on, right? So I get why the money's being directed there. It just seems odd that there's nothing in this, again, I'm looking at equity, diversity, and inclusion and just saying, hey, if I'm sinking all the money into just one part of the town or one part of the city, how is that equitable? And if you ask me, Evans Creek is a high priority as far as usage. It's a huge resource for the city. So.
I can speak to that a little bit, Councilmember Train. This slide before you is just showing the retrofits that were recommended from the study. So we do have, I think, three projects that were recommended from the Laughing Jacobs Basin plan that was recently completed, that ranked very high. That is on our draft capital plan. So this 20 project list is just one program. It does not include all of the projects that are on our capital list.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
All right, do we have any other comments or questions? Cool. Yeah, thank you both.
Great, thank you. And we have one more section to our presentation.
Okay.
Sorry. Tagi Acker will be walking us through some potential options to fund the utility. And just walking through that third issue paper that was issued for the rate study. And Tagi, whenever you are ready to start your presentation.
Thanks, Audrey. Give me a moment to share my presentation. Does that come through okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, before we jump into it, I wanted to provide a little bit of background for those that might be new for this meeting. The city contracted with us back in March to perform a utility rate study for the surface water management utility. The tasks of that study are shown here. Currently, we are in the policy framework. Back in June, we presented on the first two issue papers. We talked about fiscal policies and rate credits. And today's topic will be capital funding tools. Later on in the year, we will be coming back to council with results for system development charge update, as well as the rate forecast for the various levels of service that Audrey and Stephanie walked through today. And then we'll wrap that up with a study report. So as I mentioned, today's topic is capital funding tools. We'll be sharing some different options that the utility can use for capital funding, and then we will walk through some pros and cons of cash versus debt financing for capital projects. A couple of key items to talk about before we get into some of the narrow or broad-based funding sources is a cost responsibility. Who ultimately pays for a capital project? And in some cases, for grants, for example, that's an outside source paying for capital projects. If you're cash funding or, say, paying debt service on a loan, that would be the utility ratepayers paying for those types of projects. Another thing to keep in mind that has an impact on cash versus debt financing is the shape and duration of the capital plan. If it's a relatively smooth plan and your rates can support cash funding a certain amount each year, that can be a good opportunity to continue to cash fund capital projects. Currently, the city's surface water management utility does not have any debt, but when we take a look at the capital plan, if there's a couple of years of larger capital costs, it might make sense to consider debt to spread that cost over time. An alternative would be to raise rates to cover that capital cost above sort of that annual trend. And we'll get to a couple of examples in a few slides of what that might look like. Then I had talked about narrow-based versus broad-based funding sources. essentially narrow-based funding sources. We're using that term to refer to somebody else other than ratepayers paying for capital projects. Typically, primarily broad-based funding sources are used to pay for most capital projects for surface water utilities. And that's typically ratepayers, depending on when that is, could be now or in the future. So a couple of examples of narrow-based funding sources. We've talked about them already today in various presentations and public comments, but grants, really great to get grants, but they can be highly competitive. And typically, even if you do get a couple of grants, insufficient to cover an entire capital program, but good to go after those when available. In addition to grants, sometimes on the property owner side of things, there are some funding avenues. Most often, for this particular swim utility, system development charges are paid for by property owners when they connect to the system, and they can be used for capital projects to help offset the burden on the annual rates. On the right side of this table, those are the broad-based funding sources. And the ultimate funding source for these are rates. What varies is the timing. So you can have current year rate funding, revenue generated from this year's rates after covering operating expenditures can be used for capital projects. You can also save those up in advance and earn interest along the way. Or a third option would be if you were to borrow, spreading out that cost over time, rates would of course have to cover the principal and interest on that loan or revenue bond. So we have a couple of considerations here. I would say more often than not in this region, surface water utilities tend to side on more of the cash funding than debt funding, but there are some utilities, stormwater in particular, that do have some debt to help pay for capital projects. We typically view cash as a good for paying for repair and replacement projects, and they're pretty scalable as long as you plan in advance. And one benefit of cash is you don't have to pay interest like you would for debt, for example. But depending on your level of rates and the capital program, if you have to save up well in advance and sort of defer capital, that can add inflation costs to the capital projects. Just over the past couple of years, I looked at the Seattle Construction Cost Index earlier today, and over the past 2 years, prices have gone up over 20%. So just something to keep in mind. If there's a big project coming up and you don't want to defer it or save up in advance, you could use debt. Can be a good item to consider if there's large one-time projects that are harder to save up in advance for, or major repair and replacement. Adds interest, debt principal, debt interest payments. But if you can execute that capital program a little more quickly, you might be able to avoid some of the effects of cost inflation. So something to keep in mind. But generally, good to avoid any over-reliance on debt. We covered some best practices in the fiscal policy issue paper back in June. And depending on what the capital program looks like and what the levels of service are, we may end up recommending a balance of cash financing and debt financing, but we have not done that analysis yet. A couple of examples, for this example utility, this might be a good opportunity to cash fund the capital program and avoid debt. So what we see here is the capital expenditures in this darker blue line, varies year by year. Some high years up in the 4 to 5 million, some low years in the 2 to 3 million. And compared with that is this utility's rate revenues subtracted from that operating expenditures, essentially cash every year that can be used for capital projects. And so in some years, you're drawing down on fund balances, paying some rates. In other years where revenues exceed operating expenditures and capital projects, you're adding to the reserve of the utility to then possibly pay for a future bump with savings in advance. Now, what if there's a big spike in the capital program and you don't have the grants, you don't have enough reserves in advance, what might you do for this, multi-year period that is containing a lot of significant capital projects? If a utility were to avoid debt altogether, may have to defer some capital, or one option would be to borrow to pay for part of these capital projects, and thereby spreading that cost over time, say over a 20-year repayment period. So it really depends on the shape of the capital program. Again, fairly level, could be a good opportunity for cash funding. If there are significant spikes, may be prudent to consider borrowing, or at least test what that impact would be for the annual level of rates. So in terms of putting together the rate forecast, we have two tables here we wanted to walk through. One is the key rate components, and then the capital funding table. So when we're setting rates and kind of forecasting those costs over time, we look at operating and maintenance costs. If there's borrowing, we want to make sure that revenues cover principal and interest. Depending on the level of rate funded capital, we want to make sure that rates exceed operating, maintenance, and debt service with enough left over to rate fund capital. And you add all those three components together, that's the revenue requirement. The utility does have small miscellaneous revenue. We would subtract that out, and the leftover would need to be generated from rates. On the capital funding side of things, when you have your total CIP, of course, if you have grants or other outside funding, that's great. Annual system development charges, we want to be able to use those for capital projects. And then what comes from rates and or cash reserves, whatever's left over would either need to be deferred to a future year or funded through some other source, such as debt funding. Could be state loan, could be revenue bonds, just a couple of examples there. So in summary, I think these items we talked about here tonight are fairly intuitive, but just wanted to kind of get any feedback, if there is any, on our general recommendations of using grants or other resources first, such as system development charges, SDCs. After that, relying on cash financing and testing the rate impacts, and if those adjustments are within a tolerable range, utility could avoid debt. And then depending on the size of the capital program and the urgency and priority of particular capital projects, if there's not enough from rates, not enough from grants, considering the use of debt to fund some portions of capital projects. And so with that, I would open it up to any feedback or questions there might be.
All right, Council, do you have any questions or comments? Councilmember Howe.
Thank you. Well, I think the recommendations are sound, so that would be my initial feedback. And the question I kind of have is, how do cities get bridge loans? I mean, basically, it's taking on debt's one thing, and a bridge loan looks different. Is that a thing in city finances? So that's a question.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I haven't heard of any utilities getting bridge loans.
Okay. And I assume if you had to take on a capital or a bridge, well, okay, a loan, that and paying it off early, there's no penalty for that, obviously, and it should contribute to our AAA score. Would that also be accurate?
You say that last part again?
Yeah, I assume that would contribute to our AAA score if you take a loan, pay it early.
Yeah, there are a lot of considerations that would go into bond ratings, and we don't get into that necessarily, into the bond market, but we could pull up some examples if you're interested after the meeting and kind of share some of the things that would go into a positive bond rating. But there's a lot of things that would go into that.
I'm also just assuming that this recommendation is consistent with what other cities are doing to try to finance their own projects like this.
And we've talked to some bond underwriters in the past year, and a couple of the things that they keep mentioning that would contribute to a positive bond rating would be cash on hand, having at least 6 months of operating expenses in reserve, and then also having a really strong debt service coverage ratio. Because the city does not have any debt at this time, that's not a consideration, but.
Right. Okay, thank you for that.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I also support the recommendations. They sound pretty safe and prudent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, looks good. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time tonight.
And Audrey?
Thank you, Council.
All right, that's it?
We appreciate all the time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
That is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If it would be okay, before we transition to new business, maybe like a 5-minute break. Let's do 7 minutes just because. So no. This is why I'm in law school and not a mathematician. 9:03, 9:04. Help me, somebody. 9:03. Break. Thank you. All right, as we are getting back logged in, we are moving now to new business, the senior center. So I will pass it on to Anjali.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and Mr. City Manager. Is everyone hearing me all right? Turn the volume off on your laptop. Turn the volume off on your laptop. I have muted. No. I have. That's Yes, we're good. Take 2. Okay, good evening, Mayor, City Council, and Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Maya, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. This evening, we are introducing the topic of a senior center, which Council identified as a priority during the retreat in March. We thank you for your patience as we've juggled this with everything else that was already on the work plan for the year. I'm joined by Janie Walzer, Parks Management Analyst, who started with us a month ago, and Chris Jordan, our Recreation and Cultural Services Manager. This is a big topic, and there are many dimensions to it. Tonight's presentation represents early staff work, and our focus is to identify meeting spaces for seniors in the short term as directed by City Council. The good news is that we have identified options for regular meeting spaces for seniors, and we'll go through them in detail. At the end of our presentation, we would like direction from City Council on which option you would like staff to pursue further for a regular or consistent meeting space for seniors. Council may also choose to identify an organized senior group for the city to work with as a service provider. And there could be other thoughts coming out of tonight's discussion as well. Here is an overview of the presentation. We'll start by summarizing what we heard from Council at the retreat. We'll share some statistics on seniors, discuss current programming options, review options for regular meeting spaces, look at what a long-term option would entail, and then what our next steps might be. I do want to point out that we have tweaked the presentation just slightly, and so we've actually removed a few slides, so this should go fairly quickly. Now, for the council retreat, at the City Council retreat held in March of this year, City Council received public comment on a senior center, and after some discussions that afternoon, voted unanimously for a senior center to be added to the work plan. and directed staff to research options for dedicated meeting spaces for seniors in the interim. And now for a quick look at statistics on seniors. The current total population of Sammamish is a little over 67,000 people, and roughly 13% of that population, that's about 8,500 people, are over the age of 60 based on the 2020 census report. And an additional 6% is expected to enter that age range in the next 5 years. So now a look at what current programming we do have on the plateau. The city's model of operation is that of a contract city. So the city of Sammamish does not offer direct programming and relies on partnerships and agreements with other community-based providers. Examples of this include the YMCA for the community center, the Boys and Girls Club for the teen center, and several other providers who rent our facilities to offer programming. And while we do not offer programming, we do put on a good number of events that are open to the entire community with a conscious effort to cater to all age groups. Several of them, like Earth Day, Shakespeare in the Park, the Dragon Festival, Very Merry, are culturally inclusive and appeal to older adults. And through the pandemic, the city has also offered opportunities for virtual events, including bingo and origami, which are also of interest to this age group. We also have a very successful volunteer program, and members of our senior population routinely serve on our various boards and commissions and bring their expertise to the groups, such as our native plant stewards, our stormwater stewards, etc. And then we also have the King County's Traveling Library Center that brings library services and materials to retirement homes, nursing homes, and assisted living facilities. The Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center, operated by the YMCA of Greater Seattle, was built by the city to be a multi-generational facility with flexibility for use by all ages. This was a $32 million project for a roughly 68,000 square foot facility, which opened about 6 years ago. The YMCA contributed $5 million towards the capital costs as well as furnishing the building, and is fully responsible for the operating costs and the maintenance of the building itself. This facility offers various programs for active older adults, such as land and water-based fitness classes, lap swimming, activity swimming, net sports, field trips, and monthly social activities like knitting, painting, book club, etc. for members. The current membership fee is about $74 a month for individuals of age 65 and above. There are also some community hours, and that includes access to the community swim on Sundays, and you don't have to be a member to access that, as well as one fitness and one non-fitness activity a month. Our neighboring cities of Redmond and Issaquah have senior centers that serve both their respective communities and surrounding areas, including Sammamish. The Redmond Senior Center, as you are aware, closed in 2019 due to structural damages, and a new multi-generational facility is currently under construction. It is going to be about 53,000 square feet and at a cost of about $48 million. There will be about 20,000 square feet out of that 53,000 square feet of the facility that will be dedicated to older adult programming. The Issaquah Senior Center was originally operated by a nonprofit and has been in existence for about 40 years. When the nonprofit was no longer able to keep the center open, the city of Issaquah took over the operation in 2017. Both locations offer lunch for a suggested donation, and as well as events and classes and field trips for a nominal fee. They do not require a membership, and staff have, in addition to these two locations, looked at a few other facilities as well, mainly a few other cities, mainly to see what their facilities are like, and you have this information in Exhibit 2 of your packet materials. So with that, we will look at what other options there might be for consistent meeting locations for seniors. Back to the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center. It has 2 community rooms as you enter the facility. They are roughly 800 square feet and 600 square feet, accommodate a combined total of about 90 people. And this space could be made available to an organized senior group a couple days a week, for example, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2, starting in the fall. During the summer, these rooms are occupied during the day by summer camps and available for other uses in the evenings and on weekends only. The alternative use for this room in the fall would be drop-in board games, puzzles, and other activities for all ages. The pros for this are that this space would be free, and of course the con is that it is not available in the summer. Then we have the Boys and Girls Club, which is a teen center operated by the Boys and Girls Club through a lease agreement with the city. The main room in this facility could be made available, again, to an organized senior group a couple days a week from 9 to 3 in the fall. They have the same constraint that in the summer they have their summer camps and are unable to rent it out at that time. And they typically have staff on site providing some oversight. So pre-pandemic, we believe that there have been a couple of senior groups that have enjoyed the use of this space. And then we have our Beaver Lake Lodge. Now, the lodge at Beaver Lake Park is the only building that serves as a rental facility for the community at large. The primary demand, though, is for use in the evenings during the week and on weekends. Roughly 90% to 95% of the revenue that is generated from rentals is during these times. So the lodge could be made available for senior programming for any time between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. during the weekdays on set days of the week. And if a group needs to use the facility on a weekend, then they could reserve it following the standard procedure for renting the facility. The main room of the lodge accommodates about 150 people, and on the slide are a list of all the amenities. They also have tables and chairs and some storage place, a kitchen, and plenty of parking, and of course it is in a beautiful park setting. Up on the slide is also the rental policy with the rates, and of course council could elect to offer the lodge up at a subsidized rate if you would so desire. There are other future options requiring significant renovations. These have come up a couple of times, and these are the structures at Big Rock. You will hear more about Big Rock South through the master plan process in upcoming meetings. Lastly, while the trends are to build multi-generational facilities, if the desire is to have a dedicated facility for seniors, staff recommend it to be included in the survey and public outreach for the upcoming 2024 Parks Recreation and Open Space Plan update. It will help define what the community vision is, what type of facility is needed to support this vision, and then importantly, how we pay for it. So should the need for a senior center be confirmed in the ProPlan update, a full feasibility study will need to be conducted to determine the scope, location, funding, etc. for a senior center. And that could take about 6 to 12 months. And if the findings of that, based on the outcome of that feasibility study, we would enter into design and construction. And that whole process would take us, again, 5+ years. And based on the city's model of operation, that would be for building a facility and would not be for staffing or operating it. We would still look for a partner for that. So back to our slide of where we need direction from City Council tonight. Keeping with the city's contract-based model of operating, The city is responsible for providing a facility, and a partner organization would provide this service and programming. Staff is looking for direction from City Council on which option to pursue for regular meeting space for seniors. Additionally, Council may choose to identify an organized senior group to work with as a service provider. And Council could also pick a combination of the options that we've pointed out. The use of space at the Community and Aquatic Center run by the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club or the Teens Center could be negotiated under the current operating and lease agreements with those respective organizations. And the long-term rental of the Beaver Lake Lodge with the possibility of a reduced rental fee would need to be approved by City Council. So that brings me to the end of the presentation, and look forward to your questions and thoughts on this topic.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Howe.
Thank you for the thorough presentation, Anjali. It's very useful. I have a few questions. I'll try to be as quick as I can. As we look at national trends for a multi-generational facility or something that could be used by a community, for example, as opposed to a single purpose or a single group, we haven't looked at doing any costing or surveys or even understanding of what different age groups would be interested in, is what I'm thinking, because we've just barely started with the senior demographic. If we were to expand our notion of what this is to a community hub, for example, that would be a different demographic and potentially 2 or 3 different demographics. So we don't know how the facility would get used, but for right now, if we take a phased approach, which would be for the short term until we know what our future looks like, and as we make a determination of what we think we can afford as a city for, say, a center that could accommodate different demographics, what you've given us are some good options, Beaver Lake being the most obvious one. I do look at the opportunity with the Boys and Girls Club as another space that if we were to undertake renegotiating that lease, which we might want to take a look at that anyway and just see how open they were to discussing it. Thank you for sending it to me, so I've had a chance to look at it and see what the penalties could be. But I'd like to explore that one a little further and just see what the appetite is potentially to renegotiate that particular lease. I wonder if you agree with me that this could be a phased approach as opposed to committing to a single demographic and a large commitment of some money to say, can we manage, finding the space and then really doing a great job of helping determine that programming, because it's the programming that determines everything, I think. I don't know if the space it has to be conducive to the programming, but maybe the programming is the most important thing. Do we have any costing of what programming for this would cost for just that demographic of seniors?
No, again, the city doesn't offer direct programming.
Right.
We haven't looked into that. I will say we've kind of scratched the surface of this topic, and in the case studies, the other examples that we've looked at, there's a wide range in the other cities. I would say that one of the common numbers is about at least 500,000 and about 6 to 10 full-time staff.
Yeah, that's quite a number. The other problem that I don't know how we have the workaround for is actually getting people physically from A to B. So I know that that's been a large reason why many people have not attended certain types of events, is they simply can't get there. So the argument for something on 228th, with at least there's a remote chance of some bus service, is helpful. But I also see as another component that's a cost component as to how to assist residents in actually getting to the center once it's actually put together. Thank you, Asha. I'll have a couple more questions later. Thank you.
Councilmember Napure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions. I did not see the CWU building as part of another option that we can offer, so just curious about that. I also wanted to, I know you mentioned that, we see a 6% increase in the number of senior active older adults in the next 5 years. So I'm really curious about that. And I know when we had public comment, many people referred to empty nesters. I myself am one now. So I'm very curious about these different programs and what they have to offer. So those two were my initial questions. And again, I think the third one, funding again, anything, how do we start with some baseline, right? I think a suggestion was made that we add a line item to our budget. I think given the fact that, senior programming has been unanimously voted as a priority item by the city council, I think we should really, our budget should really reflect those values that we cherish so much. So I'm just wondering how we go about that. Thank you.
So I can attempt to answer some of the questions that were raised. And actually, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just take a minute and speak to one of the questions Councilmember Howe asked about the transportation. So there are a couple of options of the community van that might help fill that gap. And then we also have the Eastside Friends of Seniors, and they don't offer any programming, but they really are a one-to-one. They help get people to appointments and doctor's appointments or do groceries for them. And they might also be willing to help get people to some of the programming activities at some of these locations. And then moving on to Councilmember Indapore's questions, the Central Washington University, the lease agreement does not allow the city any flexibility to do that. They do sublease the gym to the YMCA currently. So again, if we were to work on any programming options, it would have to be through the YMCA for the potential use of the gym space. And in terms of your question, I think that, for example, the volunteer group, the Sammamish Seniors, considers anybody 50 plus as eligible to join the organization, and that would include a lot of us. But then we've also heard that that's the challenge of senior programming, because if you look at the abilities for people, we visited just 2 or 3 centers just to kind of see how they function. And if you're trying to figure out an activity for people from range of ages 50 to 100, that's quite a spread.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering what the preference of the Sammamish Seniors was for their location of their organization, if their preferences for Beaver Lake Lodge. And then in terms of a reduced rent for that, I know we are renting the old library building to the Boys and Girls Club for $1 a year, I think is what the lease agreement is. And I wonder, is that what we were thinking of in this situation also? I would agree with Councilmember Indepre about adding this as a line item on our budget. I do also agree that our budget should reflect our values, and if this is a high priority for the council, it should be reflected in the budget also, so I would agree with that. So I would just like to hear what the Sammamish Seniors are thinking about the location. I think personally, I think the Beaver Lake Lodge sounds like a great location. Also, the Metro community bus is a great way to get around Sammamish. I have taken it myself, and my son takes it regularly. It takes you anywhere within the city limits, even as far as the Issaquah Highlands Transit Centre. So that is a great way to get around Sammamish if driving is not an option. So I'm sure that is, and it's on an app, or you can call them on the phone and they'll just come to wherever you are, pick you up and take you where you want to go. So I think that could probably potentially solve a transportation issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Thanks, Anjali. I just had a couple of comments. My preference is for the Beaver Lake Lodge simply because the seniors could continue using that during the summer, but I would defer that decision to the seniors and see what they prefer. I recognize that we do offer programming through the YMCA. I personally just don't think that that's enough. I think that the programs are very broad. To me, they could be more culturally sensitive. I know my mother would go to the Issaquah Senior Center, and in part because they offer lunches and she was around other people or more people her age. And I feel that we have this opportunity to create something for our seniors that can be for them and to be inclusive of their needs. I was looking at the write-up that you have for Snoqualmie Valley, and it sounds like they partner with an organization called Sound Generations, and they provide the lunches and transportation and fitness classes, and so perhaps that's a model that we could take a look at. Is there an organization that can offer something with more services? And then as for costs, I understand that adding something like this again is it's going to cost, and so maybe we will have to sell memberships, and the Snoqualmie Valley Senior Center also has a store, which I thought was a great option.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
All right, Councilmember Howe, if you don't mind if I go first, if that's all right. So for transportation, I think these are all great ideas. I know that King County Council also does the retired Metro vans. So that could be an option eventually if we had, a program in place. I think that would be a really good thing to pair with that. As far as who would be that partner? Obviously, we have Sammamish seniors here giving public comment. We have, present and a lot of volunteers ready to go. My only ask, kind of like what Deputy Mayor Lamb was saying about, partnering with Sound Generations, making sure we're reaching out to the Indian American Community Services, Gen Pride, which is all of King County, Far East Senior Hub, which is in District 3, and then the Asian American Pacific Islander seniors. So just ensuring, I think, Tom, that you had mentioned it, that you had paired with somebody, but just ensuring that we have kind of that all-encompassing for, who is in Sammamish. And as far as a line item, I think that's great, but I think I want to kind of get more to what is the actual need? Is it just a consultant? Is it just a contractor? What does that line item mean? Does it mean a contractor to organize everything and then figure out what we're going to do or going to build or going to program? Obviously, I'm not saying you have that answer, Anjali, but kind of working, not that everyone wants another survey, but something that we can get a little bit of feedback on what the actual line item would include, what that would be. So thank you. Councilmember Howe?
I think what I wanted to bring up is the danger of starting with something that works for now, which is, for example, Beaver Lake Lodge, which is great. So it serves an immediate need and purpose, but it may not be the vision. And so what I kind of want to caution us, or I want us to think about, is that what's our real vision for what this should be or could be in the future. So it's and that's why I brought up the idea of this phased approach. So phase 1 is the temporary location that works for now, that's affordable, that allows us to bring in programming so that we learn from the programming and understand what works, what doesn't work, what people are attracted to, what they're not. But then it should inform a process going forward of, okay, but what are we going to build? Because at a certain point, Beaver Lake Lodge isn't going to work. You're going to need something else. And to be able to have that be part of the plan, the 5-year plan, if you will, that maybe that is a center, that is a community hub, that is multi-generational, for example, that has broader purpose and broader use and is flexible based on its programming and based on what we've learned through this phasing of, walking before we run, I guess. So that, I think that's how mentally I've positioned it in my head. Also, I think that's what we can afford to do now, and in terms of being able to commit to it. And it also allows us to plan for, but in the future, that cost is going to go up. So we're going to need time to build the ramp to that and the funding that's consistent, because you can't put it in place and then take it away. So that's just what I was thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is exactly what the Pro Plan is intended to do. So we kick off the Pro Plan early next year. It will, and as part of that, we will do a statistically valid survey. There will be extensive public outreach, and you will get to hear from the community what they want to see in a senior center, along with everything else they want to see. So you will get a comprehensive look at what the community's desires and needs are, and you will be able to evaluate based on that what the community is looking for in the way of a senior center. And at the end of that Pro Plan, if it is found out that a senior center is a high priority, then council would then kick off a feasibility specific to the senior center. And that would look at all aspects from, what location are we talking about? What is the size of a facility? What would be the cost to run it? What would be the cost to build it, and then for a partner organization to run it? And, the senior center in itself, what we all know is that it is not intended to be revenue generating. And that is why you then look at other sources of generating revenue outside the hours that seniors would use a facility. So at the council retreat in March, the sense was that's going to take way too long. We need something now. And so you may call it a phased approach, but that's what staff was tasked with, is what can we offer up right now? And this could be more like a test run, like a trial period where you can identify an organization. There are several that the mayor named. There's we've come across them in our visits. You have the Chinese Information Services Center, you have the Catholic Community Services, a Latino group, the Indian Association of Community Services, and we also need an organization to be an established nonprofit, 501c3, and meeting all the insurance requirements to be able to use a city facility. So that is something that we would need, whichever group that we are able to make the lodge available to, we would want to make sure that they meet that status. Scott, is there anything you would like to add at this point?
I will defer to council first, and then I'll follow up on that.
Councilmember Ndapure.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think, Anjali, spent actually a little extra time describing to us what the why was and how it was really a community center. It was funded by the city. I know the Y runs it. I've also heard public comment today, and especially from Sally, I think, who works on the National Council for Aging, that although we are envisioning or we want a space for our seniors in our community, what they're also craving is, in addition to programming, is also intergenerational space. And then also, not wanting to be isolated. So I think what I'm hearing from the community is that it needs to be a blended space. And I couldn't think of a better space than what we have right now. So I want to make sure that we really use the community space as it was intended, because there's been a lot of sort of investment made in that. And like from a short-term perspective, if we want to hit the ground running, I think it's a great idea to involve the existing partners that we have who have already run programs in our city to supplement, the programming that might benefit our active seniors. I know I keep going back to the CWU, but when I had organized a panel a couple years ago with the seniors in our community, I also heard that they're interested in taking classes, and specific classes like how Bellevue College does, I think it's called Telios, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think CWU was offering those classes before, so can we have those conversations with them? So those are a few of my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We actually spoke to the Central Washington and have the Sammamish seniors has these community conversations, and we've encouraged them to go to one of those conversations and hear them out and see if they can tailor some of their classes to what might be beneficial for that age group. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on the broad conversation because I heard some commitment on council to say there should be, we need to put our money where our mouth is, as it were. So what I want to be clear about is in a short-term version, that money looks like the city subsidizing the rental of one of our facilities. And that's essentially what we prepared to do. So it's not you won't necessarily see it as a direct line cost, but it will be a lost revenue or potential revenue, if you will. And I think that's okay. That's council's, obviously, it's a policy decision to make, and that's fine. We're prepared to move forward with the Beaver Lake Lodge with whichever organization the council directs us to work with to be the provider. I think to what Anjali said is we need to make sure that like with all of our other spaces, we turn them over and essentially rent them for $1. But in order to rent, like Anjali said, you have to meet our criteria so that because we are not that service provider, that organization has to be the one to be responsible for the facility and the insurance and all that stuff. So as we move forward, one of the things that I heard a lot about was doing programming. And I just want to be clear that right now we are, and I'm sure Chris will be nodding when I say this, we don't actually provide programming, we do events at the moment. And we do it with a very small but very nimble staff. And programming, if that's the direction council wants to go in the future, that's a much broader conversation about what we would do and how we would fund it, aside from any sort of a capital investment to say we're going to build something or purchase something. So that's one of the reasons why at the staff level, we've been talking a lot about using the PROS plan to compare what that might be with the other needs of the community so that we have a broad, holistic conversation about what the need is and then what does the community want, so that if council chooses to move forward at that point, you already have that already built in rather than starting from scratch. And then we get clear direction on what you may or may not want to do. Because again, our capital needs are great at the moment. And you will get that conversation when we get down into the budget. You got a little taste of it when we had management partners come in. So it's not that we can't do it, but there are a lot of capital needs, and council would have to weigh that sort of something like this against the rest of those capital needs.
All right, thank you both. I hope you got what you needed.
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. So next, item number 16, we have a couple of resolutions. You want me to pass that to you, Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. And Mark Baird will be joining us again as our Administrative Services Director. These are companion resolutions. They reflect both levels of our workforce, both our represented and non-represented employees. So these go together because it reflects the entirety of our workforce. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mark.
Good evening again, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And have I managed to get the slides up?
Yes.
Excellent. As the city manager said, I'm here to give a briefing on the employee retention pay resolutions. And this proposal, which actually began with our union, and we've been working with them over the course of time to refine it, is really about two things. It's recognition of the many city employees that were and continue to be required to perform essential functions and critical services, particularly those in person at the work site. Also, that these frontline employees play an essential role in delivering all of the essential city services that we do provide. And importantly, it's meant to be a retention tool, recognizing the great work that these employees do and the fact that retaining these employees is critical to the current competitive hiring nature. In today's climate, particularly for positions where telework or remote work is either a limited option or no option, some of these positions are very difficult to fill, and it's highly competitive for people that are out there looking for work. The criteria is really two-pronged. The eligibility-wise, they are employees that are employed as a regular, full or part-time employee and employed as of today, and then fit into one of the three criteria. At the $2,500 level, these are employees who have to work on site for their shift. They have no telework options, and they're required to be here and continue to require to be here in order to get their work done. At the $1,500 level, these employees are required to be on site frequently, but they also do have some telework type options. So you can think of, for instance, perhaps an inspector who needs to come in and needs to go out and do some of his or her work in the field, but then can also finish up some of their work in a telework schedule. And then at the $750 level, these are part-time employees and the remainder of the employees that don't fit under any of the other categories. So these employees have options, for instance, to telework and may come in some of the time and may telework some of the time and don't have a requirement where they absolutely have to be there at a particular time or a particular day of the week. The focus of this proposal is on retention. Again, recognizing the important work that employees do, recognizing the importance of keeping a stable workforce. You know, in order to really begin to build on expertise and experience and training, we want to keep our employees over time and not have to always be giving, you know, new hire orientations and having people just learn the basics. We want them to be able to progress in order to further our level of service for the community. It's a very difficult employment hiring environment at the moment, especially for those that don't have telework options in today's world. Many cities and counties have used funds to pay retention bonuses similar to this proposal. So in terms of cost, based on dividing the workforce into the proposed categories, it's approximately $250,000. For a funding source, we would propose using the CARES Act funds that are available for use. And in terms of process, there are companion resolutions. Exhibit 1 is a resolution for union represented staff, and that would authorize the city manager to sign an MOU with the union and authorize the payment of the retention pay. Exhibit 2 is a similar resolution for non-represented staff, and it authorizes the city manager to make this payment. And with that, if there are any questions, be happy to try to answer them.
All right, council, I'll open it up either for questions or comments or entertain a motion, of course. Deputy Mayor, oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead. Deputy Mayor Lamb, yeah.
I just wanted to make a motion to authorize the interim city manager to enter into an agreement with the union regarding the payment of a retention bonus. based on the union's proposal and to make payment of the retention bonus for all staff using unspent budgeted COVID response funds.
I will second that. Was that for one or both?
I put it into both.
Both? Okay, for both resolutions, yeah, I'll second that. Did you want to speak to that motion?
I think we have a great staff. Our staff works really hard, and I want to do everything we can to retain our staff. And so that's why I support this.
Great, thank you. So all those in favor of passing both resolutions 964 and 965, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, by 6-0, both of those resolutions are good to go. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Have a good night. And then, Council, we are moving on to reports. I believe we just have one from our city manager. I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and I promise we'll get out of here before 10 o'clock. This is very short. So I want to remind that coming up in September, we have a couple of joint meetings, one with the Planning Commission and one with the Parks Commission, and it is our recommendation that we might start those early if we could. And our approach would be for the joint meeting, that we would sit in a U-shaped table down here, have the joint session, and then close, and then council move up to the dais for the rest of the meeting. And so by starting early, we have a little more time for you to have dialogue before we get into our regular business meeting. So if that's okay, we will make sure that the clerk's office notices it out at that time period. Second piece is Planning Commission. We now have an opening because someone parachuted out and parachuted onto the dais next to me. So we would like to propose, and I think Lita has a quick proposal to throw up on the screen about process and timeline with the goal of seating somebody ahead of our joint meeting with the Planning Commission. So Lita, please take it away for a moment. Or Krista, take it away for a moment.
You can keep rolling through your topics.
Okay, while they're doing that, I have one other quick one, and I just want to follow up with council on this. This doesn't need to be a big conversation, but there's been a option that's come up for the city to rejoin the chamber. I just wanted to run that by council and see what the flavor was. I think it makes sense for the city to be a part of the chamber, but if you all think differently, now's your heads up. Okay, fantastic. We will reach out to the chamber and rejoin as a member. Thank you.
Oh, I'm just going to add that the housing action plan is closing at the end of the month. So if anybody hasn't filled it out, please do so.
Great, thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's a great plug for that. I appreciate that. All right, I think, there we go. So we aren't seeing it on the screen. For those online, just give us a quick second here. We're almost ready. There we go.
So this is kind of the same outline as we had for the city council vacancy. We just adjusted it. So we're thinking that on the 20th to the 27th, oh no, that's not correct. So Okay, so the 20th, so the end of this week till next week, we'll be gathering questions from council. Tomorrow I'll email you to submit in 3 questions that you'd like to be added to the application. And those questions will be selected after we do some sort of vote on those questions by council. And then August 1st, we'll open it up on the website to applicants and do some advertising and get the word out to the public. And we'll also be contacting the previous vacancy commissions that have applied before, and possibly the council candidates. We'll advise them of the opening and see if they're interested in applying to that also. And then we're thinking on September, the first meeting, we'll be able to have the applicants available, possibly do everything that same evening, whether you still want to do an interview with each one. Depending on the number of interviews or applicants that we have, we may be able to interview them with an additional question or two, at least kind of like we had with the council vacancy, have them set up and in-house. And then you can possibly vote again that evening, because we'd like to get somebody in place for the joint meetings that are happening the following 2 weeks. So I guess the Planning Commission is on the 20th. Of September, so it'd be nice. We'd have 2 weeks for them to get on board and be a part of that. Does that sound okay?
Looks good to me.
If there's okay, so I'll be sending out something tomorrow about questions and get your top 3 questions returned to us, and then we'll have a vote. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right, council, I will entertain a motion to adjourn for a month or so. I think we'll be back at the end of August for a little goal setting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, by a vote of 6-0, we are adjourned 4 minutes early. Thank you.
Good night.